Hi, it's Todd at Kerns from Slash featuring Miles Kenny and the Conspirators 2, Heroes and Monsters. You are listening to Thunder Underground.
Welcome to episode 368 of the Thunder Underground podcast. Trent here as always. And this week we've got a great one for you because Todd Kerns is here. The bass player of Slash, the vocalist, and bass player of the brand new band Heroes and Monsters, and a ton of other great stuff that Todd is involved in. We're going to talk about all that here coming up. But first, let me tell you who you're sponsored by, and that would be DEB Concerts, a promoter based right here in Tulsa that has brought tons of great acts to this area, such as Last in Line, Buck Cherry, Great White, Lita Ford, Bisto Blanco, Saxon. The list is great and long. They also started booking shows at the BOK Center, the arena here in Tulsa. Brought in acts like Megadeth, Lamb of God, Poison, Tom Kiefer, Ice Cube, Snoop Dogg, and that list continues to grow, as well as the fact that they book the Roadhouse stage every year at Rocklahoma. This year will be no different. The Rocklahoma lineup announcement should be coming here in the coming weeks. Of course, we'll talk about it here like we always do. Probably have Doug Burgess back on at some point like we do every year to talk about his stage at Rocklahoma. But until then, hit up their socials, DEB Concerts on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. debconcerts.com is the website. Keep up to date on all upcoming stuff, and of course, we'll keep you up to date here as well. Sunset Tattoo is a tattoo shop located in Midtown Tulsa. Their tattoos are done good and proper, they're state licensed, and they are mother approved. 25 plus years of experience from Jason Thompson and his crew. If you check out the socials, Facebook and Instagram are both Sunset Tattoo Tulsa. There's tons of photos on there from their work throughout the years, all different styles. I had a tattoo done by Jason a while back. I had a cover-up actually done that I'm very happy with. I know many other people that have had work by him as well. You need to give a call or a message to set up a time to get in there to talk about what work you're looking to have done. They also accept walk-ins. So go by, hit up Sunset Tattoo and tell them you heard about them right here on Thunder Underground. Finally, we've got MedFarm, a dispensary located in Broken Arrow, Oklahoma, 24683 East Highway 51, right off the highway. They've got a drive-thru, so if you message or call ahead, you can zip right through that drive-thru and be on your way. You can also look up their entire selection on leafly.com before you head in, or just head in because they've got a ton of knowledgeable staff on hand to help you out with whatever you need. Hit them up on their socials because they're always running specials. Facebook, MedFarm, that's PHARM. Instagram is MedFarmOK, and the website is medfarmok.com. If you tell them you heard about them on Thunder Underground, they'll give you 10% off your first order. On top of all of that, they are cannabis with a cause. 30% of their proceeds at all times are going to build no-kill animal shelters. So hit up MedFarm, wherever you're at. It's worth the drive just for that 30% going to no-kill animal shelters part of this whole thing alone. So hit up MedFarm and tell them you heard about them on Thunder Underground. All right, jumping into this episode. Don't have much to talk about here beforehand because, it's not super long, but it's a pretty good lengthy one here with Todd at 45 minutes. So before we get into that, I just want to mention that a couple days ago, Ozzy actually announced he was officially done with touring or retiring from touring. And opposed to many musicians, that say that, or we will all tend to actually believe because we all know Ozzy's condition and what he's been through the last few years. So this isn't like one of those, farewell tour, no more tours, 2 or 3. I'll be back here in a few years, to capitalize again. As we know, this was probably a long overdue announcement. Ozzy's had, even excluding the whole situation of the pandemic, he's had a tour that has been canceled and rescheduled 2 or 3 times because of his health issues that all happened around the same time as the pandemic. But they did say that they are going to plan to try to do, a show here or there. So don't be surprised to see, Ozzy pop up on a major festival in Europe or even America here in the coming years, or just a one-off show here or there. Let's hope it can happen because I've always taken Ozzy as one of those people that probably needs the live stage. Obviously he hasn't been on in a while and he's still kicking along, but he just seems like one of those guys that, you've always taken it like that's where, he wants to be. So I imagine being away for too long without getting to do it might, in a way it could be detrimental. So let's just hope that, he can do a show here or there in the next few years. But besides all that, let's just jump into some Todd Kerns talk. Todd Kerns, the bass player for Slash, featuring Miles Kennedy and the Conspirators. So that would make Todd one of the Conspirators, correct? Todd, you guys need your own Facebook page. You should, succeed from Slash and, build yourself up on your own. No. That's ridiculous. But I love this band. Anybody that's listened to this podcast in length knows that Guns N' Roses has been my favorite band since I was a kid, and Slash is quite possibly my favorite musician of all time. Right up there somewhere with Mike Patton, so. For, whenever Slash started this, he started that first solo album that he did. Well, he had Slash's Snake Pit, but I don't really consider that solo album, even though it kind of is. But he did the solo album that featured vocalist on all different tracks, and Miles, of course, was on 2 of them. And then, shortly after that, they announced a tour, and Miles Kennedy came on as the vocalist for that tour, and then that's where this whole band was born. And from thenceforth, they've now had 4 studio albums and a live album as well, with this lineup of Miles Kennedy and the Conspirators that Todd Kerns is the bass player and backing vocalist for. He also sings some songs live. I've seen him sing Dr. Alibi more than once. I believe maybe Mr. Brownstone once, if I'm remembering right. What speaking of, when you think of those songs and the vocals that go with them and the style of voice, Todd's voice lent very well to him when I saw him live. So whenever I heard him live, separate from that with Heroes and Monsters, not live, heard his voice, I was very, shocked, just surprised, I guess would be the right word. How huge and high this guy's voice is. And, doing this interview, I've known that he's been a part of the Bruce Kulick band for a while, doing live stuff. But I hadn't seen him, I hadn't looked up videos, so I didn't realize that he was performing the Paul Stanley parts in the Bruce Kulick show. I just assumed, not just because he's a bass player, but because his voice I thought would lend more to Gene Simmons. But then you hear the Heroes and Monsters album and you realize that's not the truth. So I'm jumping back and forth between all these projects here, but the Bruce Kulick stuff, is really cool to me just because this guy, it just proves, how versatile this guy is. We've all known that he's a multi-instrumentalist, guitar and bass and vocals, but the majority of us know him from playing bass for Slash. So here's with Bruce Kulick playing guitar and singing Paul Stanley songs. And now with Heroes and Monsters, he is the bass player and lead vocalist in this triple threat Heroes and Monsters is bringing, this power trio. This is a solid album. It came out here just a little under 2 weeks ago, or it'll be 2 weeks ago tomorrow. January 20th, the debut album from Heroes and Monsters. It's got 10, 11 tracks, and it's just, straight up pure hard rock and roll. If you're into classic rock, Kiss, Aerosmith, all that great stuff, you'll love this. It's even got, punk attitude at times. It's got melodic attitude at times. So just, it's just a solid rock and roll album. One of the great albums here early in the year of 2023. So if you have not heard Heroes and Monsters, check that out. If you've never seen Slash live, or in fact haven't heard any of these Slash with Miles Kennedy and the Conspirator albums, definitely do that. I don't know where you've been living. If you're listening to a podcast about hard rock and metal, surely you have by now. And if you're just listening to this for the first time because you're a Todd Kerns fan, I welcome you as well. We've got an episode coming up soon with Robin McCauley from Black Swan, and of course the Michael Schenker Group and Macaulay Schenker Group. I bring that up because he comes up in the interview because Todd is also a part of Raiding the Rock Vault now, which Robin's been a part of for quite a while. And speaking of past episodes, well, there's not even speaking of, just mentioning past episodes. When we're talking about Slash and Guns N' Roses, Dizzy Reed of Guns N' Roses has been on this podcast before, so There's a link in for that as well. Check that out. Tons of other great episodes you can check out. More coming as well. Got some scheduled to be recorded. We'll talk about all that again when it happens. But in the meantime, let's jump into this. Here's Todd Damon Kerns of Heroes and Monsters and Slash featuring Miles and the Conspirators.
Yeah, it's been, the funny thing about this kind of project, there I am. I'm using that project word, the P word. So many people are like, is it a project or is it a band? And I'm like,
right.
Well, isn't every band a project and every project a band? I just think with this thing, when you make a record with some friends, especially considering it's, it initially had come up during, lockdown and all that kind of stuff. So it really sort of presented a giant window of time where we could do something like that and make a record that was, for three guys who have ridiculous schedules. It was kind of like, hey, what do you think about this? To me, it's all gravy at this point, to be able to kind of make music and have people kind of be able to hear it and enjoy it. That's really all that matters to me. At the end of the day, it's the ideas of, Kiss and Aerosmith and a lot of my heroes don't even make new music anymore. So it's kind of like being allotted the opportunity to do so is great. I'm happy to be able to kind of continue to do, to just keep putting music out and see what happens,
How'd this all come together? I know it sounds like from what you just said and from what the press release sounds like this, like you said, it's an actual band that formed. I know a lot of the Frontiers things sometimes are kind of put together, but was this on your own accord kind of?
Yeah, no, although they're so good at gathering up that guy from this and this guy from that and being able to kind of do full supergroup kind of projects, that wasn't really the case with us. Will just reached out to me during the lockdown, but it wasn't really like it was probably a year into the lockdown, we're basically not doing too much. And what do you think about getting together like this, like you and I are getting together,
right.
Especially at a time when it was like, still wasn't really cool to be hanging out and all that kind of stuff or whatever. And it was sort of like, okay, well, yeah, by all means, sounds like fun. I was doing stuff with my other band, Took, and just keeping busy, keeping creative and trying to keep busy. I was very fucking lazy, frankly, because it was it was the nature of things at the time. Yeah. And so it was kind of like when someone comes at you and goes, hey, what do you think about this? You go, well, yeah, of course. Considering at the time there was a great deal of chatter about how the music industry is irrevocably changed and it's never going to be back to the way it was, and touring is completely over, and a lot of that kind of doomsaying was going on. But I was sort of the mindset of like, I never really believed that. But at the same time, I was sort of, conscious enough to say, well, I guess we'll just write and record. We can always do that, right? And then as it happens, we just sort of moved forward with that and started writing songs. One song turns into 10 and turns into 12, and now let's put out 10 of them or whatever, and here we are.
How'd you guys get Steph involved with this?
Well, Steph and Will were already like in cahoots. They were like, initially already kind of like jamming around and coming up with ideas and stuff like that. And I sort of came in they were already a little bit up and running. So they had Will had toured with Steph at some point. I'm not really sure if it was with Basco Rossi or what exactly they had initially sort of connected on, but they had been pals for a while. So I never even actually physically met Steph Burns until we were in LA making videos for the record. So we'd met like you and I are talking now, wow, a bunch, and sort of going over music and writing, and it sort of really opened my eyes. I had done one other project, a band called Minefield with some guys from Ace Frehley's band. and we put out a record, um, completely recorded remotely and independently. And I had done a bit of that because people will send you music and ask you to play on it or ask you to, write some lyrics or sing a melody to it. And I go, yeah, that sounds fun. Let's do it. But this time was sort of, it became super normal, and it's really normal now, to be honest. The the idea of recording remotely and having stuff sent to you and sending stuff back and forth. It's not like it would have been in the 70s or 80s when you would have boxed up a 2-inch tape and mail, UPS'd it to Italy. I mean, like Will's in Florida, Steph's in Milan, Italy, and I'm here in Las Vegas. So it's we never really were in the same room once. So, but we were very conscious of trying to make it sound like a band, make it sound like a real recording. I mean, as opposed to just kind of like, it's a totally different animal. But good work can be done. It's proven. I've seen it happen.
Well, you said they already, had kind of got together and had some ideas formed when you came in, especially being the vocalist. Was it kind of just freedom to put your own stamp on this as well?
Yeah, a bit. I mean, there was, quite a lot of it. Yeah, I could do kind of my thing, but it was, there were some existing songs that they had been working on. They'd had up and running. There was a couple of Will's old band, Dark New Days, that Raw Power comes from that. I Knew You Were the Devil comes from that. So there was a bit. It was a bit of a free for all, really. It was really kind of like showing up at a cookout or something, and just you bring the potato salad and you bring the macaroni salad, and we just sort of like just kept kind of hammering away. So it wasn't really like anybody was, you do this, I do that. It was sort of like there was a lot of like sort of cross pollination going on, and that made for a pretty cool record. It makes for a bit of a diverse ride, which I'm kind of happy it was, as opposed to just, one version of, or 10 versions of one song kind of thing. It's sort of like, it sort of takes a bit of a ride, which was kind of fun for me.
Were any of the songs written as the three of you together? Or were they all kind of piecemeal?
Well, it was really sort of hard to do it together. But we did do, quite a bit of, them working on music, me working on lyrics and melody, and my parts sort of. So in that way, yeah, we would work on it together. But it was, and a bit of this, as you and I are talking, like, just sort of going back and forth. But it was, like I say, they had sort of had a kind of not a clear idea, but an idea of what they wanted to do. And I guess I just sort of fit the mold as like looking for a bass player and a vocalist. So why not try and gotta find a guy who can do both? And that's sort of where I fell into it.
I love all the tracks on this. I'm a rock guy
you.
through and through, but the song that jumped out to me most was Angels Never Sleep.
Oh, cool.
Was this something, did you have a part in that, or is that one of the tracks that had been around a while, or how did that one come together?
That's such a cool song. Yeah, it's well, that one, Steph brought that one in. It was a very, very clever. I like these kind of epic-y type songs that sort of, creep up on you, and it's I'm actually really looking forward to playing that one live. So I don't really remember exactly where it came from or what even my part would have been in it. That's kind of the fun part of doing this sort of thing, is you kind of like, it isn't until like when you're in the middle of it, it's so subjective and you're just drowning in it. And then like a year later, when you're kind of, or whatever, however many months later, you're looking at it and going like, it's like a marathon you survived, and you're like, oh wow, I totally forgot how cool this was. But I enjoy getting that objective point of view where you can kind of look at it with new ears and new eyes and kind of go, oh, okay, I kind of feel so totally different about things when you get a step away from them and come back to them. But yeah, I credit Steph with most of that song. That was something he brought in with, I don't know what state of finished it was, but it was, we obviously do our thing and adjust and sort of change things to, meet the individual players. But yeah, no, it's a great one.
Did you guys self-produce this?
Yes. Yeah, it was, It was impossible not to, really.
Right.
We basically had to self-produce ourselves. And then, there was, Will actually is like really surprised me in his ability as a producer mixer type minded guy in a, because you just assume like drummers are drummers, not as an insult, just that, he's a monster talent as a drummer. And then on top of that, he's a great writer. He's a great, it has great skills behind the board. So yeah, a lot of that, a lot of the fine tuning of it all is from Will Hunt.
You've done, a lot of stuff throughout your time. Do you prefer something like that where it's just kind of the band members producing this thing, or do you like outside input when it comes to having a producer on board?
Yeah, that's actually really interesting you bring that up because it depends on the situation. Like, I've been in my own, when I'm in the driver's seat, and I really get a lot out of that. Obviously, I think everybody enjoys sort of like having a game plan in mind and then like implementing it all into place. But that said, you can't, when I bring in people like Elvis, Michael Basquiat, and all these different people we've had the opportunity to work with, they bring a lot to the table. Obviously, that's why they are who they are. So sometimes those objective ears, those outside ears, just have a clearer view of things because the rest of us are in there chopping away with our machetes trying to get through the jungle, and they're kind of like they can kind of see the path sometimes. So it definitely is different. I will say for this project, I really enjoyed the freedom of just kind of like, let's just make some music. There was never really a huge kind of like game plan in place as far as like, it has to sound like this, it has to be this, it has to be that. It was just kind of like, let's just make some music and see what happens.
But you guys have this Italian tour coming up here next month. Can we expect to see you guys anywhere else in the world, or is that in the works?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where everybody's got schedules that are ridiculous,
right?
And with this kind of thing, the window of opportunity just popped up as, hey, what do you think about this couple things in Italy that turns into 10 things in Italy? And you're like, yeah, well, let's do it. I mean, that's the only way to kind of jump into these things is kind of like, here we go. We're going to make this happen. So I think it's one of those things where if the opportunity, I mean, I say if, but I'm sort of saying it in my mind. I'm like, absolutely, there will be other opportunities, but at the same time, I'm sort of, wise enough to know that, hey, I play with Slash and Miles. Their schedules are impossible to navigate as well, And so with this kind of situation, it's like, I don't know. It's like, with Evanescence and with Vasco Rossi and then all the things that I'm doing, it's sort of, it just kind of creates opportunity and also takes it away. but at the same time, I think I think we'll find an opportunity to do some more stuff for sure.
And I'm guessing Italy came about because that's where Steph's at, and isn't that where Frontiers is based out of as well?
They're based out of there as well, but Steph kind of was the one that sort of pulled the trigger on a couple things that turned into a tour. So hats off to him for pulling that off. But it was, it's I haven't been overseas since 2019. So to me, it's like, it's time, it's been time for a while. So you have to take into account there was some COVID in there that kind of took that off the possibility list. But here we are, and I'm ready to do it.
Like in this project and a lot of the other stuff you're doing, you're singing as well as playing. But when you're doing something like Slash, you're just, most of the time you're just playing. You do backups and sing a song here or there. But is it easy for you to transition from just playing to singing as well? Or is it something when you're singing, you got to think about it more, or how's that work for you?
That is funny that you bring that up, because there are elements about playing your parts and singing that can be quite challenging. They're actually they can be challenging in Slash too, because I'm singing, the lion's share of, I'm singing basically all the other vocals. So there are times where you've recorded the bass and then you sing something, whatever harmony part or whatever lead vocal really, and you don't really think about, do these things correlate? Can I do this while I'm doing that? And then you have to sit down and go, oh man, this is going to be a thing. So on several occasions I'm going through the Heroes and Monsters stuff now to get ready for the tour. And it's sort of like, oh man, there's a bit of head scratching to kind of do on some of these like this part while I'm playing it doesn't really jive with what I'm singing, so I have to kind of figure out how to do that. It takes a bit of sort of basically sitting in here just kind of knocking the ideas around before I get to the rehearsal space is sort of the key. But yeah, there's something about like, in whatever, like tomorrow I'm going to go fill in for Steven Adler's band, and I'm just playing bass on that, and it's kind of like, there's something interesting about just being like, you're going to step up, play bass, and don't really think about singing at all. You're kind of like, just sing Night Train, whatever, but you don't really think about the actual. But then as soon as you're kind of like, this is the gig you're doing, you just kind of like lean into it and just do it. It's sort of, that's the gig. That's what it requires, So you just change your brain and away you go. I've been doing it for a long time. So it's sort of, it's become kind of normal to kind of like, you want me just to play, you want to sing a song? Okay, great. You want to sing, not sing? Okay, great. And then I'm singing the entire show. Okay, here we go. It's just depends on what I'm doing.
Were there any songs with Heroes and Monsters or with Slash that were particularly hard to pull that off in the rehearsal space? Or
Well, the song "Blame" on the new Heroes and Monsters stuff is tough. Like I'm having that sort of well, it's a crazy song to begin with because it's one of those songs that those guys sort of came up with that has all kinds of um some sort of time changes and stuff like that. So that stuff alone is out of my wheelhouse already. And but then you have to throw into the fact that, okay, now sing over top of that while you're playing that part. It's like, okay, I'm playing in a on a drop B tuning that I don't normally play in as well. So the whole thing is pretty new to me. But I'm one of those people who enjoys the kind of I enjoy the challenges of things. I don't. I mean, I'm sort of big on like, when someone throws something at me, I'm kind of like, I've never done that before. Let's try that. And that's sort of where I'm at with this particular project for sure.
whose idea was it for you to sing Dr. Alibi live? Was that something you presented, or did someone,
That was
Slash or
Slash.
whoever, bring that to
Yeah,
you?
yeah, yeah. That was Slash because I think that Miles has such a beautiful voice that it was kind of like, let's let Todd with his whiskey drinking, cigarette smoking voice. Although I don't drink whiskey or smoke cigarettes, but but man, let us make him sing it. And it was sort of like, yeah. I mean, I was the massive Motorhead fan and all that stuff. It's as a bass player lead vocalist, Lemmy is always sort of like pretty close to your heart. So it just sort of became a thing. It was like we're representing that record in 2010, the solo record that he recorded, and there was a couple songs like Iggy Pop has "We're All Gonna Die," and then Lemmy had uh, Dr. Alibi. So it was like we were just sort of doing versions of those songs, and he was just like, "Do you want to sing this?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sure." I think "We're All Gonna Die" might be first. We even named the tour "We're All Gonna Die." So I think it was kind of like he kind of wanted to have that out there. And then when Alibi came up, because Lemmy was, often would show up and sing that song with us. And then it just sort of became part of the show that I sort of sang it. And I think Miles always liked, well, I know he does. He always likes the idea of like, no, you sing a couple songs. I'm going to go take a break. And I'm like, okay. So suddenly it would turn into Guns N' Roses songs. I'd be on the road and they'd be like, do you know Out to Get Me? Or I'm a Shell, You're Crazy. Once in a while, I'd be like, Welcome to the Jungle. And I'd be like, yeah, okay. I just kind of know all those songs from my days of just growing up on Appetite for Destruction. So I kind of just randomly know them all.
Right. Well, when you listen to Heroes and Monsters, your voice, is, I mean, it's up there, way different
Yeah.
what you hear from someone like Lemmy. Like, which one's more natural for you?
Um,
Or
yeah, I don't know that that's interesting you say that because it's like when I was a kid, I just wanted to be like in a punk rock band. I wanted to yell and shout. And as you're doing that, someone goes, you're playing in a cover band and someone goes, hey, sing this one. And okay, and you sing it. And then the next thing you know, they're going, now sing this one. Sing the next thing you know, you're the lead singer because you just happen to have, because I just happen to be able to have a little more range to be able to pull off some of those songs that were more challenging. But so I don't know I suppose it's natural. Like my voice kind of has a natural higher timbre to it, but I kind of always wanted to be more like a shouter and a yeller kind of thing. And then it just sort of like turns into this kind of you kind of realize that you have these other gears you weren't aware of, and you just kind of go to them when when it presents itself. Like, I could go here, let's try that, and you just start singing these higher bits and whatnot. And I'm big on the challenge of like, let's try and do this and let's try and do that. So I kind of lean into it a little bit here and there. And if it sounds good, I guess we just keep doing it.
Yeah.
Hopefully it's a lot more challenging to pull off in a live sense. I mean, okay, like, it's one thing to be, I always joke with Miles. I go, why couldn't we all just sing like Dave Gahan from Depeche Mode and just like, your own? We could do that every day. As soon as you kind of like lean into singing like higher, you're kind of like, well, you got to take, Miles lives like a monk on the road. Like, he doesn't want to get a cold. He doesn't want to over talk too much, all that stuff. It's like, it's a challenge.
Well, being in a band with someone with a voice like that, have many of you learned anything from him throughout the years, like when it comes to singing?
Well, I think mostly you end up learning that it's, you have to take care of yourself. I think that's the important thing with a guy like Miles, is he's sort of very big on just taking care of his his instrument. You know what I mean? And I think that he's I don't know a lot of, I mean, like, I'm a street fighter when it comes to that kind of stuff. I never have any training at all. So it's like everything I do is just sort of like, and I think like a lot of singers, they're all street fighters, and then they face some issues, and then they have to kind of think about training to kind of maintain. And I think that I've been fairly lucky in that, I the lead singing thing is not the only thing that I do. So it's sort of, for a guy like Miles, I mean, he's gotten smarter with it over the years too. Not smarter, but he's gotten smart with it in that he sort of picks and chooses his moments of challenge, where he kind of like, in singing something, he's sort of kind of more controlling in how he does it. He's just not going to go out there and just kind of knock it out like every single song. He's kind of like trying to find his moments to kind of really kill it. And that's just smart, trying to like, kind of pace yourself during the course of a show, and during the course of an album. I mean, I just think it's just wise. And I think that's just a guy who's been doing it as long as he has.
When you do these shows with Bruce Kulick, do you sing one or the other, like the Paul Stanley songs or the Simmons songs, and someone else does like Brent Fitz, I know, sings some as well? Like, how's that process work?
Yeah, in the Bruce show, initially we first started doing it with Bob Kulick before he passed away, and I was just singing everything, so Gene and Paul. And then we brought in our friend Zach Throne. He plays with Ace Frehley, and he plays in Corey Taylor's solo band. And Zach's an amazing talent, so he took over all the Gene Simmons stuff, and I just sing all the Paul Stanley stuff. So it's really fun being able to do that. I mean, I'm a Kiss fan, so it's kind of like that whole thing is a blast. So, but getting to do that, that show, and we kind of wanted to get it to a point where once Bob had passed away, it sort of became a thing of like, okay, well, if we do this, let's try and like really do an homage to the thing. We got the guy who sings the Gene stuff, I'll sing the Paul stuff, and then we'll just really try and do a faithful version of these homage to these songs, and to Bruce's era, you know what I mean? And that became kind of the focus, was to try and do something faithful, something for the fans, really. And I mean for myself as a fan as well, and to Brent and Zach as well.
But shouldn't the bass player be singing the Gene parts though?
Yeah, but in that show I play guitar, so it's kind of
okay, I didn't realize that.
It's the weirdest thing where I kind of like, because I've always been sort of I started as a bass player, but I have moved in and out of guitar positions depending on what I'm doing. In my solo stuff, I played guitar, and I just kind of like, enjoy like when I can do something a little different, I move over to guitar or bass depending on what's happening. Bass is really honestly my main gig, and it's sort of the thing I feel like I have the most natural. Although I think I'm a very strong rhythm guitar player, and I think that's a very underutilized thing. I think that having a strong rhythm player, especially in a case with someone like Bruce, who is the lead guitar player. And the weird thing about the weird thing about Zach, my friend Zach Throne, is he plays bass for Ace Frehley and plays guitar for Corey Taylor. So we're those guys that kind of like, although he's a much better, he's a lead guitar player as well, you know. So he's much more skilled in that department. But we are those guys that will switch in and out depending on the gig. Yeah.
What are some of your favorite songs that you do with Bruce Kulick?
Oh man. Well, we got to do the Oath from the Elder, which was pretty dope. You know, yeah, I was like, you know, that's a super deep cut.
Yeah.
I really like, you know, it's like funny that some of the songs just, you know, like Crazy Nights was never my favorite Kiss album. It was just really slick and really overproduced to me. It's got amazing songs on it, and it's really an amazing era of Kiss, but it just sort of has elements about it that aren't my favorite parts of Kiss. But in doing the versions of the songs that we're doing, where it's just a guitar rock and roll band, not it doesn't have all the keyboards and all the slickness to it, you know. And suddenly songs like Turn on the Night really kind of, to me, although I always liked the song, became like a whole new, another level to me. Like, wow, this is really, I really feel like this is kind of really coming together as something cool, as opposed to just like this song. And honestly, I'm the kind of guy too, when we play those songs, it's almost the reaction of the audience is the most important part. Like, I kind of like, I feel like their reaction to it is important. You know, it's like, you know, so we play some deep cuts. We play some really crazy stuff that most people wouldn't even entertain playing. But the Kiss fans, you can't dig deep enough. They love it.
Yeah, my favorite Kiss album is Revenge. I know a lot of people saying that it's not a mask out. I mean, excuse me, it's an
Unmasked
masked album.
Yeah.
You know,
We've played that one in its entirety. We played the entire album before. Yeah. It's there's a lot of deep cuts. It's like, you know, it's a strong album. You know, it's a really strong Kiss album. It's basically, well, outside of Carnival of Souls, it's really the last hurrah of the non-makeup Kiss.
Yeah,
and people love that album. Yeah.
Well, I know you've got these Todd Kerns and Friends shows you do. Is that basically covers, or you know what goes into that?
Yeah, I've done a bunch of solo material in my career, and being in Vegas, I've got a good following of people who follow what I do and a lot of my material. So, but when we do those nights, it's, you know, it's got a bunch of that, but then it's sort of like bringing up a friend. Like we brought up Oz Fox and did Iron Man by Black Sabbath. We brought up Mickey Finn. We did Feel the Shake by Jet Boy. I think it's just kind of like fun to just, you know, to just bring up friends. Who else was there that night? Man, that was a crazy, well, Brent Muscat from Faster Pussycat, he got up and we did Faster Pussycat and a bunch of songs like that. So it was really fun to be able to kind of do that. And I that's the one, you know, like being in Vegas, it's like, you know, a lot of my friends are here and they all play in a lot of different things and do a lot of cool stuff. So it's really those nights are, you know, that was the last one was kind of my birthday party, so that's why we kind of everybody sort of showed up for it, so it was really fun. Even Rami from Foo Fighters showed up, so it was kind of a wild night, but we had a blast. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it seems like when you look at, you know, your schedule, you're always doing something. Is there, like, do you know how many shows you average a year between all your different projects?
You know, I thought of that because Zach from the Bruce Kulick band, he sent over like his stats, and I go, wow, that's crazy. And I thought, yeah, you know, I never really thought about it. I would have to sit down and really look at a calendar or some sort of, you know, schedule and look at how much I do. But I'm just the kind of guy that, you know, it's, you know, there's 365 days in the year. And it's like, if I can, when someone comes at you and goes, hey, what do you think about this? I go, you know, if it works in the calendar, I go, yeah, let's do it. You know, if it's fun. And like with Steven Adler and the guys, they reached out a while ago and were like, hey, can you cover these couple shows for us? And I look at the calendar and go, yeah, I think I can. Let's do it. You know, and I did a bunch of stuff with them just post COVID. Like when the world kind of opened, I was filling in for them. Tanya, the bass player, went on to play with Whitesnake, and I just kind of went over there and played some shows, and then got busy with Slash, and that was the end of that. So, so that kind of stuff comes up all the time. I mean, so I'm going to do with Steven Adler. Then I'm going to Canada with my band Took for 2 shows. Then I go to Italy for 2 weeks or whatever, 10 days. Well, yes, about 2 weeks, 2 weeks plus a day, I think. And then I come home and then I'll be sitting in with the Rock Vault, raiding the Rock Vault here in Vegas with, those guys from Whitesnake and Dio and a bunch of different bands. And we play a show here, and that's kind of what we do when we're home. It's like, I just enjoy playing music. People kind of, it's weird because people will say stuff like, "Oh, I got to work on Friday." I mean, like, aren't you playing a show? And I don't think of that as work. I go, "You're not working, you're playing," and that's sort of where my head's always been at. It's like, we're going to play. That's going to be great. Yeah.
Well, you mentioned earlier, like, schedules when it comes to like Slash and Alter Bridge, Guns N' Roses, all that. Like, does that make it tough for you to schedule stuff out? I'm sure way in advance, but still, is it something you've got to always be on standby for? Or
Yeah, well, the Slash stuff is all encompassing. Like when we're making a record or doing a Slash tour, it's sort of like that's all you do. It's sort of just like that's all you're going to be able to do because it's just that kind of schedule. But we know well in advance when that's sort of kind of projecting because they really have to reach out to all of us because of availability basically because the fact that we've actually been able to kind of keep the same lineup for well, it'll be 11 years now if with Frank and Brent and Miles and Slash and I, it's sort of that's a significant amount of time. And I think that if we can, I mean, everybody's doing other stuff, so it's and has been doing other stuff this entire time, so the chances of it's just what you prioritize, and people make themselves available for things that are rewarding and fun in their own way. And I really love those guys. And when that call comes in, I go, yeah, let's, I mean, often the call comes in, are you available here? It's like, no, I'm booked until here, but I'm available after this. And so we just have to kind of orchestrate everything around like everybody's availability. And seems to have been working out so far.
well, speaking of availability like that, have you ever been hit up for a project, just like a random other band or something that you couldn't do that really just kind of hit you in the gut? Like, I wished I could do this. I know you probably can't say if, specific names.
No, there's not a lot of like, like, I wish I could do that. But there are things that come your way and you go, that'd be great. Like it'd be fun to do that or, but A, B, or C is occurring and I'm just too, usually it's the Slash thing. The funny thing is when you play in a situation like Slash, people kind of assume, oh, he plays with Slash. And then they'll see Guns N' Roses going out for like, a year. And you still get thought of as like, it'd be great to call Todd, but he plays with Slash. And it's like, yeah, but Todd's not out with Guns N' Roses. Right. So sometimes those calls, you have to kind of implement those kind of calls yourself. But yeah, there have been a few that have come my way that I absolutely would have done if I wasn't busy doing something else. But I never really kind of went like, I didn't feel like torn, like, it was just kind of like, no, I'm busy doing what I do,
Some of the stuff you mentioned, like Kiss and Guns N' Roses growing up and all this, do you ever step back and when you think of these guys like Slash or Bruce Kulick or Michael Sweet or any of these legends that you performed with, you ever step back and think this is kind of surreal at moments or?
Oh, absolutely. All the time. It's like, I'm one of those guys that never really lets go of the, I'm such a lover of rock and roll that, when Lemmy would be around or Rick Nielsen from Cheap Trick or, the Aerosmith guys or, and Kiss obviously. And, we played the Kiss Cruise and, you're playing on stage and you look over and Paul Stanley's just standing side stage watching you. It's like, it's just super surreal. You're like, what's going on here? And Slash too, we would get on stage and I'd played Sweet Child of Mine in every club band and every high school, when I was a kid up until I played with him. It was just like just the standard Vegas. I'd go to a Vegas casino tonight and watch somebody play Sweet Child of Mine,
Yeah.
And played it a million times. And then you're standing on stage with Slash playing that song, and you look down and he's standing in front of you playing the solo, and you go, "That's the guy. That's the guy." I've seen a million guys play this solo, but this is the guy who made that solo, and then that's surreal. It can be certainly surreal, totally. And the first Kiss concert I ever saw, Bruce Kulick was the guitar player. So I always tell that story. I go, look, it's like it's surreal to have watched your favorite band for the first time ever in your life, and then however many years later, it's suddenly like you're playing with that guitar player on a regular basis. It's something I'm always very grateful for. I'm not the kind of person that goes like, yeah, no big deal.
Right.
I take it pretty, I think it's an amazing achievement to be able to be playing music at all for a living, and Zach's playing with Ace Frehley, and I'm constantly like asking him like, what was that like? It's got, because like you're playing with one of the four, it's like, and all kinds of crazy stories, but it's that stuff's not lost on me. I'm the kind of guy that's like, wow, that's so cool.
I mean, speaking of favorite guitarist, I read your post where you said that Jeff Beck was your favorite guitarist.
Yeah,
What
it's
did he mean to you growing up, or like starting to play, or how did
it's
your love for him
weird.
grow about?
I grew up on like punk rock, and I loved like the Ace Frehleys and the Rick Nielsen's and that kind of playing, where the solos are like they're a statement, but it's more like a part of the song. You know what I mean? So when you growing up as a kid, being a kid in the '80s, the guitar playing became a whole other thing, as you know. I mean, and I had a great deal of respect for guys like Van Halen or Randy Rhoads, the kind of guys who would really construct amazing pieces. But at the same time, it got to a point, in my opinion, where just to me, I just didn't feel like just because you can play fast means you're really saying anything. So I think that it really kind of it ate itself in a way. You know what I mean? But with guys like Beck, you know, um, there are so many versions of Jeff Beck. Like you talk about like the Yardbirds. When you go all the way back then, and he's a totally different guy than the guy he was, you know, in more recent years. But that makes sense because the guitar as an instrument was evolving the entire time. Guys like Clapton and Page, also both of them were in the Yardbirds, are the kind of guitar players that got to a point where Clapton kind of leaned into his blues thing and stayed there, and clearly has grown in that area and uh, sort of just went down that blues journey. And Page kind of did what he did, and now just sort of like he didn't need to prove anything. He had accomplished who he was and does that. But guys like Beck, to me, just kind of kept growing in a way that, like, when the heavy metal guitar playing kind of game happened, suddenly he was with a Jackson and a Floyd Rose doing every bit, every bit of that kind of stuff that everybody else was doing, with just as much feel and taste. But he happened to be like from the previous generation of guitar players. And then when you see him, like if you watch the Ronnie Scott's show, he has a show at a you can find it on YouTube at a place called Ronnie Scott's, and it's a real tutorial. Like, it's the kind of thing that's both inspiring and depressing at the same time, where you're like, I don't even know if I play guitar. It's like you look at him, like he's doing stuff like, oh, I don't know what's happening. It's like, and it's only the kind of guys like him who really have that ability to kind of think outside the box, and I think that that's sort of the beauty of guys like him. And I think that's why when I say he's my favorite guitar player, is because I I actually love watching bluegrass guitar playing, because there's something about the speed and the technicality of it, but you take away the distortion and it's suddenly like, wow. It's like a lot of things that we as guitar players and musicians are doing can be kind of masked by a certain barrage of volume and noise that's going on. But when you scale that all away and you watch these guys really throw down, country guitar playing is really awesome to me too. Like, to watch guys who are doing stuff and they're not hiding behind a lot of distortion and a lot of overdrive. And then watching Jeff kind of, he was one of those guys that sort of weaved in and out of all of that. He could play real soft stuff. He would take his slide off and suddenly be playing it as a thing down on it would just, like I said, I would just be like, who thinks of this kind of stuff? Jeff Beck. That's it. Yeah.
Right. Well, you mentioned rating the rock vault. Like, what do you do with that? Do you sing? Do you play guitar or bass? Or
I sing in that show. Yeah.
okay.
It's fun for me because, I'm a person who is doing three jobs in a sense, because I don't have to rely just on the one position. You know what I mean? It's sort of like, if I was just a bass player, I would be working a third of the time. So it's kind of like, my voice is I've always been a singer. So it's kind of always been one of those things that And when I came to Vegas, I was, my voice was sort of the ticket. I kind of that kept me sort of in business. I had to, I leaned right into all the positions I can do, but my voice sort of became the ticket. And then getting the gig with Slash was sort of more like, okay, well now I'm a bass player. I ended up carrying all the other vocals because I could sing or I could sing those parts, and that became kind of the focus.
So with Raiding the Rock Vault, you're singing, you're not playing anything else? I mean,
I
playing
play
it.
guitar. I play
Oh,
guitar
okay.
portion of the show, but mostly acoustic guitar stuff and whatnot. It's a really, there's like usually, well, there are three male vocalists, a female vocalist, and we all come out and sing different stuff. And it's a kind of a classic rock from the 60s up into the 80s, is the sort of intention. So it goes from like my generation all the way to, well, Jump by Van Halen is how it ends. So it kind
Okay.
of covers a lot of ground.
Yeah, I've had Robin McCauley on the podcast a few times. I know he
The
was,
greatest.
I don't
Yeah.
know if he's still doing that or not, but yeah,
He's
that guy's
not
voice is
currently,
unbelievable.
but
Yeah.
he's coming back for a trip we're doing together. He's one of the all-time greats. Yeah.
Yeah. You mentioned a few times Brent Fitz, like, and you've played with him in different projects for a long time now throughout the years. Like, what's it like having someone like that as a rhythm section you can lock in with that's like extremely familiar? I'm sure it makes things easy.
Oh yeah, I've
Yeah.
known Brent like 30 years. Like we're both from
Yeah.
Canada, so it's kind of like there's sort of a more of a brother thing going on there than an actual, um, just a musician thing. It's sort of an unspoken. We're both Canadian, and we've known each other a long time. So it really is an unspoken thing that occurs between, the musicians that way, and it can be, you know, when you find the right guy, you just lock right in. So Brent and I, well, the funny thing in this other project we do together, this Canadian project called Took, Fitz plays bass and I sing and play guitar. So it's a really kind of like swing from the fences kind of like thing, that because he's a musical guy. On the last tour, he was playing piano for Rocket Man. He plays piano on basically or any keyboards on any of the Slash records we've done.
Oh, wow.
And he's an incredibly talented guy. It's just like one of those guys who's got um, a lot of skills in that in every possible way. So luckily with him and Zach and myself, it's kind of like we cover a lot of instruments and a lot of voices and a lot of ground.
Final question for you. Are you a baseball fan at all?
I am, but we're Canadian, so the Blue Jays are our only team.
Right.
but I do follow the LA Dodgers and the and I'm very excited about the prospect of the Las Vegas. Well, it's supposed to be the A's, so I'm very curious.
Yeah, that's
But
what
why
I
do
was
you?
going to ask you if you were
Are you gonna?
hoping that happens.
Well, not only that, but I'm an NBA guy too, so I'm kind of like there's talk of that too. So I don't know. I
Oh, I
mean,
hadn't heard that.
yeah, it's the big focus right now is on baseball, but I mean, in witnessing in real time the effect that the Golden Knights had on this city and continue to, frankly, it has been massive. You know what I mean? And it's sort of, and then the Raiders. I mean, the Raiders is an adopted team, but it's a huge deal. You know what I mean? And I still haven't seen a Raiders game, but I see the Knights a lot, and but I'm very excited about the prospects of having a baseball team. It's changed the entire focus of this city of not just being gambling. Now it's gaming and shows and sports. And I
Yeah.
think that eventually we're going to have the four major food groups of sports all within like a 2 or 3 block radius down there. I don't know where they're going to put all these things, but there's talk of them being down there. So I'm quite excited. Yeah.
Yeah, I read the leading site now for the baseball stadium, if it happens, is where the Tropicana's at. Like they would tear
Yeah,
down the Tropicana. Yeah.
that's the word.
Yeah.
So, it's the amazing thing about Vegas is there's very little, they don't treat anything very with much, sort of nothing's precious. It's kind of like it's the
Right.
Tropicana. It's a legendary spot. Blow it up. It's
Right.
this guy like, we need a baseball team. I've seen it happen a million times. I mean, when I first came down here, my friends had gigs at places like the Riviera and the Stardust and all that, and they're just gone. And it's like, these are legendary spots. Sinatra, Elvis, Liberace, they all played there. Blow them up. And but that's Vegas. It's in a constant state of change, and I think that this is a big part of it. The Las Vegas A's. Who knows?
Right.
We'll see.
Well, what's the NBA thing? Is there a talk of a specific team moving there, or is there
No,
like an
but I've been
expansion?
hearing. No, but I think I haven't heard anything about an expansion team. Expansion would be great because then it's our team. But
Right.
I got to roll to lunch in a minute here. But the chances of but everybody's been talking about, and they're talking about a new arena too, which I'm always like, wouldn't you just use T-Mobile where the Knights play? And they're like,
Yeah.
no, because Vegas wants another venue for more use of. They can put now Adele's over there, and Aerosmith's over here. It's like, so it's just one of those things where it's Vegas. They can find use for another venue for sure. And
Right.
I haven't heard anything specific about the NBA, but I know there's rumblings, and of course there is, because they've seen the success of the Knights. The Raiders are here, a baseball team. It's just the natural progression that we should have a basketball team. So
Right.
changes the game, changes the entire game. Yeah, we'll see.
Yep. Well, right on, man. I really dig in the Heroes and Monsters album, and I appreciate you taking this time with me today.
Oh, absolutely, my pleasure, brother. Thank you so much for coming out,
You bet.
hanging out with me.
There you go, Todd Kerns of Heroes and Monsters and Slash, featuring Miles Kennedy and the Conspirators, among many other great acts that you heard about there during that great conversation. A huge thank you to John Freeman of Freeman Promotions for his continued support of this podcast, and of course, a massive thank you to Todd Kerns for taking some time out there to talk about everything he's got going on. This great new album from Heroes and Monsters, if you haven't heard it, check it out. You can find it anywhere, everywhere albums stream. You can also buy it everywhere that you can buy albums. So hit up Heroes and Monsters and follow them on all the socials and all that great stuff. If this is your first time listening, there's 367 episodes previous to this one you can check out. Just recently had one with Miljinko, the vocalist of Steelheart. Also had one just last week with Justin Foley, the drummer from Killswitch Engage. I've also had on members of Kiss. We talked about Bruce Kulick there a bit. Bruce Kulick has been on this podcast a few years ago. That was a great one. Gene Simmons has also been on this podcast. Glenn Hughes of Deep Purple, Black Country Communion, and now the Dead Daisies has been on this podcast. Frank Hannon of Tesla has been on this podcast multiple times, 4 times, I believe. Damon Johnson of Brother Kane, Black Star Riders. Now Leonard Skinner has been on this podcast 6 times. I also had on members of Great White, Warrant, Dirty Honey, Megadeth, Testament, Helmet, Typo Negative, Clutch, Corrosion of Conformity. Man, the list is great and long. Recently had on Josie Scott, the original vocalist of Saliva. Dee Snider of Twisted Sister has been on here before. So just dig. Jeff Tate of Queensryche was on here last year. I could just keep rambling. So check them all out. TheThunderUnderground.com is where you can listen to everything. You can find all the socials there. So follow, like, subscribe wherever you're listening to this right now. Follow, like, or subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. You can listen pretty much anywhere podcasts are heard. Spotify, SoundCloud, all those places. If you see a post on social media, like it or comment or share it. That helps out greatly. And I think that covers it for another week. Like I said earlier, Robin McCauley will be coming soon, as well as a couple others that are scheduled to be recorded. I'll talk about all those soon. All right, once again, huge thank you to Med Farm, DEB Concerts, Sunset Tattoo, Freeman Promotions, and Todd Kerns. And until next time.
Thunder Underground, y'all.